Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to Movie Night here on Random Track. I am your fearful, company oriented captain, Christopher Ringle, joined as always by my friendly yet pessimistic first officer, Brennan, Mystical Mar, who I believe believes it's game over, man. Game over.
Well, hopefully I would have more optimism than he did.
Today, we're going to be taking a look at, in honor of Halloween, a sequel. Not the first sequel we've looked at, but definitely the first sequel outside of Star Trek. We're looking at the James Cameron classic Aliens. And as always, I turn over the con to Brennan to introduce our latest crew member.
Thank you, Captain. So joining us today is our faithful comms officer, one half of the Cinefanatics. It's Robert Adams. Robert, welcome aboard.
Well, thank you for having me. I don't know if I'm supposed to be making Star Trek references or like aliens references because I feel like we're getting our spacefaring warriors crossed. We're crossing the streams here with what space we're doing. You know what would be interesting though is if they actually did do an episode of of some Star Trek show where they go to land like on LV-426 and they run into the Xenomorphs. Like that would just be so much fun.
That would be
They did. It's
cool.
called the Gorn.
Oh, okay. So, needless to say, I know way more about aliens than I do Star Trek. I do know some about Star Trek, but not enough to really be sitting here talking about that. So that's why I'm here for the alien talk.
Very nice. Now, Aliens is arguably one of the greatest sequels of all time. Definitely up there. But what's interesting about it is it goes in a completely different direction than the first. Ridley Scott's Alien was like a slasher film. This is like a rip roaring action adventure. So we'll start with you, Robert. How do you feel about the different direction they took this film?
So I actually really like it. Now the thing is I didn't really get familiar with the Alien movies until like after I had graduated high school. Just because I was a kid and I was scared of scary movies. Um, I'm thinking like back then, I don't know how I don't know what the actual reaction was when these movies first came out because you had like Alien was what 79, Aliens was 86. I don't know how the reaction was at that time, obviously, because I was a little kid. We didn't have the internet. There wasn't a way for people to spout that off. Nowadays, I would be curious how, if specifically like this, I know there's other movies that have done like extreme tonal shifts between each iteration of films in a franchise, but I'm curious as to what people would think with this. I actually really like it. And for me personally, because of that tonal shift, it makes it really hard to pinpoint which movie would actually be my favorite of the franchise. It's got to be either Alien or Aliens. I mean, I don't know anyone who's like, yeah, my favorite movie is Alien Resurrection or Alien 3 or whatever, but
Uh,
I'm constantly juggling between the two, and I tend more often than not to land at Aliens just because I do like the action aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. Now, I have to ask, director's cut or original?
For Aliens,
Aliens, yeah.
I do actually, I kind of like the director's cut mainly because we get a little bit more of the backstory on Ripley and especially like information about what's happened with her daughter Amanda. I also like getting that little bit more of detail with Newt's family When I was a kid, I had a friend that I met in fifth grade. He was a big Aliens fan, and for his birthday, I actually bought him like an Aliens comic book that was Newt's Tale. I didn't know that the story of that comic book was basically in this movie,
Yeah.
and so I read the comic, gave it to him like as a birthday gift. And then later on, watching the director's cut of Aliens, I was like, "Oh, that's what that comic was telling
Hmm.
that full story." Going so far as to actually seeing like what happens to Newt's father when he gets the chest burster and everything. Like we're following what happened with Newt before we first see her in the theatrical version, which we don't see her until she gets found in that little hidey hole.
Hmm.
So I do like the director's cut a little bit more just because it fleshes that out.
I think I'm in agreement. Captain Ingle,
I was not
director's
aware that
cut
there
or
was not aware. The version I have, I bought
oh,
digitally a while back, and I just hadn't watched it. So I'm going to assume it's the original cut. Is what I'm going to assume.
Did you
hmm.
Uh,
see did you see anything from Newt's family?
no.
Okay, then that's the theatrical. There is a quick little bit where you see Newt with her brother Timmy, the parents. They're out like on their like land crawler thing. The mom and dad go to check out the signal. They come back and the father has the face hugger, and then that's it. We don't see Newt again until when we normally see her in the movie when she gets found. So
Okay.
if you're not familiar with that scene, then you had the theatrical version.
Yeah,
All
and
right.
also we learn that Ripley's daughter has already passed away
Yeah.
in the director's cut, which explains a bit about her maternal relationship with Newt. All right, let's get into it. The story is pretty straightforward. Ripley is found after 57 years. She tells Wayland Yutani what happened. They don't believe her. And the planet, LV-426, where the Xenomorph was originally found, is now populated. And everything goes wrong when the colony is infested. Ripley is recruited to join the colonial Marines to go and find out what happened. While they're there, all the colonists are gone, except for a little girl called Newt. Ripley essentially adopts Newt, and they try to solve or stop the infestation on the planet. Meanwhile, dealing with Carter Burke, the company representative, a rather shady company man, and they learn that the humans are basically expendable in the eyes of the company in order to get a hold of the xenomorphs. And eventually, this all leads to an epic conclusion and showdown with the alien queen. So that's kind of the story. And as happens in the original film, the characters are picked off one by one by the Xenomorphs. So story-wise, Robert, your thoughts on the story?
I love like what the again going back to the idea that they turned this into an action movie. I love that because you had the dynamic in the first movie of these are just expendable crew members. They're just out there to tow this mineral ore back to the company. Who cares about their personality or anything? While this movie, we get introduced to a very colorful group of military personnel. And I
Mhm.
just love how that dynamic worked with the the expansion of telling the lore of the xenomorphs in this. Like in the first movie, it's kind of slow pacing. The first like half of the movie until we actually get the chest burster popping out, it's very slow paced. It's very ominous. You don't know what's exactly happening. While in Aliens, yeah, it still takes a while before we actually start seeing the xenomorphs on screen, but that entire time you are thoroughly entertained by this cast. It's endlessly quotable. It's a lot of fun leading up to, oh yeah, this is an alien movie. We got to start fighting these creatures all of a sudden.
Mhm.
I love it. So I love the direction that they took with this, and I feel like it made it more approachable for like common like moviegoers. While there might be people that were still a little hesitant with Alien, maybe they didn't like the gore of the chest burster, maybe they didn't like the slow pacing at the beginning. This I feel like was a little more refreshing and was able to it was more approachable by more people.
Captain Ingle, your thoughts?
Um, the story for me, it's connected, but it feels like night and day. So while the first one is unexpected, you don't know what direction it's going, and it's a classic horror. You were right when you said that this is kind of a run and gun action thriller kind of thing. And that really affects the story because it's no longer about survival as the way it was in the first film. This is now about preservation and in a small way, revenge. And I really like this aspect of it because now you have a character who has to focus not only on, kind of being there as an advisor and warning, but then you come across this child and you are a mother figure as well. You have to protect it. It's a big change. And this story really follows that. It's something that I think, and we'll get into, that Cameron does very well, and that's focusing on the people in his stories. It's not always spectacle. I think the Titanic, where following the people was half the journey. Yes, it was a beautiful spectacle, and it is a beautiful film. Even for 1986, it's a beautiful film. But story wise, I really like the connective tissue, despite the fact that it doesn't feel like the first film in any way.
Yeah, very well said. I think that what makes it interesting is that it is a very more straightforward kind of story than the first film. And I think in order to tell an action, the focus of the film needs to be front and center. And that's what this film does, like immediately. It's a sense of we have to stop these creatures. And so it's very focused in the story. Now, what would a great story be without great characters? And this movie is filled with them. Now, we're not going to talk about each character in turn because there's
Can we?
too
Because they're
many.
all awesome.
So let's begin by talking about our favorite characters and character moments. Brother, we'll start with you.
Um, I know like a lot of people are, and not to dissuade any of y'all from choosing them, but I know a lot of people are going to go like the Sigourney Weaver, Ellen Ripley, Michael Bean, Hicks, maybe Lance Henriksen's Bishop. I really love Bill Paxton in this movie. He has all the great
Yes,
lines. He has the probably the most boisterous personality, the one that's
yeah,
really in your face. And what I really love about it is he's both at the same time, he's talking the talk. He sounds like the ultimate badass and whatnot, but at the same time, he's very much a wuss. How quickly he goes from like we're gonna kill all of them and we're gonna have fun with the colonist daughters and what just trying to be like all that is man type of thing to game over, man. We're screwed. We're not gonna make it 17 minutes. Like it's such a funny dynamic for that character because he bounces back and forth between both of those throughout the entire movie. I just he's a smart mouthed, he's cocky. I just love it. I love that character for him. So that's easily my favorite of the whole movie.
nice. Chris, you got a favorite character or character moment?
Like, favorite insinuates that I like this character, but from an acting standpoint, I gotta give it to Paul Reiser, and it
Yeah,
surprised me because, like, I hate him. I hate this character in this movie, and you're supposed to.
yes,
But the fact that he can evoke those emotions, and mind you, I grew up watching Paul Reiser on Mad About You. I don't hate Paul Reiser. I want to
no,
laugh at him
no,
all the
not at
time.
all. And
But
he's
watching
mostly a comedian.
right.
Yeah.
So watching this, and it makes you hate this man who is willing to sacrifice everybody for the sake of the profit, which is corporate 101. But on top of this, something that now two times over we know is deadly dangerous, and yet they're still going to try it. And this formula would continue in a lot more films down the line. Ergo, Resident Evil, the Resident Evil franchise, substitute for everything that was going on in Aliens. It's the exact same thing. I hate this guy, but for that, I love watching him every time because he just does such a good job of giving you something to hate. You don't hate the aliens. You're frightened of them. You're excited to see them, but you don't hate the aliens.
Hmm.
You hate the corporation.
Oh man,
If
good,
I can
good
add to it,
point.
I think the one downside to his character is we don't get a satisfying death. Like that
True.
door opens, we see the shot of him turning around, looking up at the alien's mouth, like sitting there all dripping and drooly, and then that's it. We don't actually like. He is the type of character that you want to see. It's gonna sound weird, but you want to see him like eviscerated on screen by these creatures. You want to see him
Mm.
get his comeuppance. If we got to see that, then maybe I would like his character just a little bit more. But
Yeah,
like, I
no,
wish we
well
got that.
said. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
I
really
mean,
go ahead.
and personally, I love Newt. I do.
Yes.
Newt is great in this, but I have to admit this that I have a very personal reason why I love Newt. And where I live, uh, this young actress,
Carrie
Carrie Henn,
Fisher.
who actually is now Carrie Butcher, this is how I know. She teaches at a school that is less than a mile from my house.
Yeah.
She is a local where I live, and I've met this woman. She doesn't like to talk too much about it, but she does not ignore the fans. She still goes to conventions and things like that. And I just love a real world person talking to, even though they're a child actress. Uh, and I enjoy it. And Nude is so much fun. You don't ever want to see anything happen to a kid. Of course, if you're a kid in one of these films, don't you think you might have a little bit of plot armor? Just a tiny bit. Who's going to
Yeah, a
kill off
little.
a kid, right? Not
Depends
James
if you're in
Cameron. James Cameron would never kill off a child, Titanic.
yeah.
Oh
Depends
yeah.
if you're in a Terrifier movie.
Oh
Anyway,
yeah.
so I really enjoy her and her story too. Just the story is fascinating. But
Mm.
Nude is also amazing in this, and it's sad that this is the only thing she ever did. She did some commercials and little things before, but this was it. And then she was done. And then she went to school. She graduated out of my house and went off to college, and has now moved on. But she's creates a fabulous story. It's a great one-time appearance, and you don't always get that from kid actors.
It's
It
true.
was good that she actually won a Saturn Award for that.
Yeah.
Isn't that
She won like
nuts?
she won like a best performance by a young actor for the Saturn Awards for that performance,
Very nice.
which very deserving. Like she should have gotten like Academy nomination because she played scared little girl like perfectly.
But what's crazy for me is in real life, I'm a teacher. Last year, I taught her daughter and had no idea, like none. So that was kind of a cool experience when I discovered that her mom was new to
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, Hicks is my favorite. Michael Dean was quite a staple of the 80s. And Hicks I really like. I like his relationship with Ripley, with Newt. I like that he's the opposite of Bill Paxton. He's the calm one. He's the one that sleeps during the drop. He's just like chill. And I'm glad that he survived. And also, uh, Lance Henriksen as Bishop is a great character. And I like the mystery of Bishop. You think that he might do what Ash did in the original film, but he doesn't. And even though he gets horribly mangled, he survives. And I like that. So those two characters. And I have to mention Vasquez. I love Jeanette Goldstein, even though she's not actually a Latina, which
Couldn't do
is
that
a
nowadays.
little odd, but I like her. Um, but really, the star is Sigourney Weaver.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you, this is unusual. She is the only actress that I can think of in an action movie to be nominated for Best Actress at the Oscars. What an achievement. And Ripley has become one of the great movie characters. Um, so really, really quick, thoughts on Sigourney Weaver? Captain Engel.
Sigourney Weaver and Ripley really created um, this renaissance of female characters that were strong. They are heroines, not heroines, heroines. I mean, when we've had very male dominated heroes throughout cinema history, up until Ripley, I don't really think we truly get a really, really strong, powerful, gung ho female hero until Ripley.
Mm.
And she opens up this renaissance that later would include Lucy Lawless
Yeah.
in Xena Warrior Princess.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of even Ming Na Wen going up till like Agents of Shield and Star Wars now.
Yeah.
Like these actresses who feel stronger in these take action roles. He
Hmm.
didn't have that. Ripley opens the door for that. It's Sigourney Weaver's work here. And you're right, Aliens, her performance in Aliens is way better because she's not the focus in the first film. She
That's
just
true.
happens to be the one to survive, that stereotypical one, and a cat. Um,
And the cat.
but
Yes.
and the cat, yes. But
Jones.
yeah, her performance in this film exemplifies what it meant in the 80s to be a strong and powerful woman, and that would resonate throughout film and television to today. And it's her we have to thank for that.
I agree. And also, he gets to be an action hero
Mhm.
and a mother. That I like. I like that. Robert, your thoughts on Sigourney Weaver?
I mean, y'all kind of said it. Like she is like one of the forerunners to like the great movie heroines. Um, and what I also find funny is it's both her and Linda Hamilton are the two that I go to for that example, and they're both
Yeah.
from James Cameron movies.
Yeah.
Uh, and both really came into like this warrior woman aesthetic in the second movie in the franchise.
Yeah.
And
For the
then
Linda
like
time.
Hamilton.
comparison
No,
comparison
you're absolutely sorry.
and then like I compare her kind of like what you were saying before where she really was like a background character in the first movie and she became like the lead action star in the second one. I compare that a lot to Ash from Evil Dead. He was kind of like a
Yeah.
background character kind of sort of in the first
Yeah.
movie, and then he's the survivor and he becomes like the leader, and now he's the icon of the whole series. You
Hmm.
talk about name the first character that comes to mind from Evil Dead. You're thinking Bruce Campbell's Ash. Same thing with the Alien franchise. Think what's the first character that comes to your mind? Ripley, Sigourney Weaver. So I love that like we're mixing in a lot of different ideas and motifs with her character, and Sigourney just knocks it out of the park every single time. And going back on also what y'all were saying, her playing like this hardened action role while at the same time she is having to relive or repurpose her status as a mother to Newt in this movie. As we know, like you were saying, she was in stasis for like 57 years. We find out that she had a daughter. Fun fact: her daughter in Aliens, primarily the director's cut, was played by Sigourney Weaver's mom, who was older than her. So we got that time shift since Ripley
Ah.
was in like suspended animation. Her daughter even like surpassed her in age. I'm doing air quotes, even though this is like a podcast, but yeah, her quote unquote daughter passed her in age and is now old enough to be played by the mom. So I love that. Like that was some great idea work. I don't know who did that. If that was Cameron, Sigourney, casting director, whoever. That was phenomenal. But I love her in this role, and I'm eager to see like almost anything else Sigourney Weaver ever pops up in, because of Ripley, because of that role. Especially if she does anything where it's like a cameo, I'm like, yes. Like Cabin in the Woods, love it.
Very well said. But yeah, I think we can all agree that this is a great character film. because there's a lot of great characters, and particularly anchored by one really strong performance. We come now to themes. Now, we already talked about it, which is this idea of motherhood. That Ripley is, there is a hole in her life because of their daughter. And Newt sort of fills that. Um, and we talked about that. So we'll talk about another theme, corporate greed. Now, this is interesting because right now, there is a lot of talk about this problem. A lot of companies are under the gun because of how they treat their workers and how they put profits ahead of everything else. So we'll start with you, Robert. Your thoughts on that theme, the corporate greed theme.
I like that because I mean that's actually a theme that runs throughout pretty much all of the Alien movies.
Yeah.
You always have Wayland Yutani as the shadowy figure that looms over all the stories. At the end of the day, they really don't care what happens to the human protagonist as long as they can get their perfect weapon. And they're able to essentially, it sounds like they want to like synthesize it, turn it into an actual army that they can control, even though we see plenty of times you really can't control the xenomorphs in these movies. So it's that wanting to always try to be bigger, better, more successful, but you're doing it in very sleazy, unscrupulous ways, and it just always fails. It never turns out. I think actually the my favorite my favorite of seeing this, other than obviously Carter Burt getting killed in this movie, my favorite is actually from Alien 3, the original theatrical cut of that. Ripley jumping into the molten lead at the end, and you see the creator of Bishop, also played by Lance Henriksen, who's there representing Wayland Yutani, and you just see like how passionate he is when she jumps because you see him leaning over like, no, I need my specimen. Um, and like that's all he cares about. He doesn't care about her life. The company doesn't care about anyone else. Which is something I like also with Aliens. One of the first things we see specifically of the colonists on LV-426 is a little kid riding his big wheel like Danny from The Shining, just riding it through the hallways while all the adults are working and moving around real quick. So we're seeing that as this is what the company is setting up. The company is a false face for we're providing stability for your family. We want to be the company that your family can depend on, while at the same time they're willing to sacrifice all of y'all for the profit.
Yeah. And uh and it seems to me, and maybe I'm wrong, that they knew about LV-426. And yet they set up the colony because they want the aliens. They want those xenomorphs and are willing to sacrifice colonists just to get it.
It's like
Yeah.
compare that. Well, now we have even more information because of Alien Romulus.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if y'all seen that. Not really going to give any
I
spoilers for
did.
that in
Yeah.
case anyone hasn't. But like at the very beginning of that movie, we see Kaylee Spaney's character is like, "Well, I've done all my hours for the company. I'm free to go live on my own." And then the company's like, "Nope, we need you to work another like 12,000 hours or so."
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, when her and her little crew gets up to that Romulus and Remus space station, we see evidence that the company has already been aware and has already tried capturing specimens of xenomorphs. And this is a movie that takes place between Alien and Aliens. So going back to Brennan, what you were saying at the beginning, that Ripley is having to convince the board that this alien attacked and killed all of the crew of the Nostromo, and they don't believe her. Now you watch it through the eyes of they know exactly what's going on. They actually do believe her, but they're not going to admit to it. And so it just really like doubles down on how treacherous this Weyland Yutani Corporation is.
Captain Ingle, your thoughts?
This is not the first or last time the evil corporation idea would come up. I could even think back to 1973's The Soylent Green and the Soylent Company.
Mm-hmm.
Same ideas. They were willing to do whatever it took to keep the status quo going. And they wouldn't be the last. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the 80s was the time where business was king. I mean, Wall Street. Wall Street is an iconic 80s movie for a
Yeah.
reason. And that's because a lot of businesses ran themselves that way. And in fiction, this was that way too. I'm thinking of this company, Wayland Yutani, Omnicore from RoboCop, Cyberdyne mentioned in the first Terminator, obviously plays a bigger part later on down the line. That's just in the 80s, just in the 80s. And then we'll go into the 90s later and into the 2000s. This idea of the evil corporation is something that is used in film and in fiction an awful lot. But I think it's very effective here.
Mm.
It's very effective because it gives us again a central point of focus and disdain. We're not meant to like the company. You're not. It's very clear. It's not even hidden. I'll tell you what, Cameron did a good job carrying this over from the first film. And the first film barely even touched on it, but it was there. It was absolutely there. None of this would have happened if, they were woken up because the company wanted them. Um, and we live in a world today where we are talked to about the big corporations all the time.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who would argue that Amazon is evil. There are people who argue McDonald's is evil. There are people who argue Apple is evil. Like, we're gonna get it, no matter where you get it. But these movies accentuate these things that have been in existence since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. Even before that, you go back to the 1800s. Sorry for the history lesson. Go back to the 1800s with the East India Trading Company. This is the East India
Yeah,
Trading Company,
that's true.
people.
That's true.
100%. This has
That's
been
true.
going on for a very long time. It's not a new concept, but they do it so well in here that I don't feel like we're being beaten over the head by it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's very clear who is causing the real problems here.
Yeah.
It's not the aliens.
Yeah. No, well said. I think that it's very George Lucas in the sense of the evil corporations. All right, let's move on to music. The score to Aliens comes to us from the late, great James Horner, one of the great composers of our lifetimes. And the score here is very minimal, but it's effective. And a lot of it's like the jump scare music or the action countdown have become iconic in film. Thoughts, Chris, start with you. Thoughts on the score?
The first movie, if we remember in that discussion, I talked about how the score was almost non-existent, and that was okay. That was important
Mm-hmm.
that you didn't have a score. You let the environment set it, but this is an action film. And James Cameron knows how to work with James Horner. They work together very well. This will not be the last film, I believe. Um, and it really plays to it. It's exciting. It's always exciting. I still think of the ending um, as, they're in the airlock and she's trying to get rid of the queen. Um, is it a queen? It is a queen. Like a queen to me. Anyway,
It's a
I've
queen.
seen bigger queens. I've seen bigger queens later. So I always goes, really a queen? Anyway, well, that point where she goes, get away from her. Well, I won't cuss, even though it is my quote, but there is actually a swell in the music that is like he makes you go, yeah, yeah, when you're happy and great with it, and it's powerful. It's not something you're gonna like look back on and remember fervently, but in the moment when you're watching it, that's what matters. And Horner plays to those advantages. He plays to those moments, and then you forget it. It lets you know when to feel, but you don't remember the exact specifics of feeling. You just remember feeling it, and the music does that. But you don't go back. Remember that score? You don't. It's not Indiana Jones. It's not Star Wars. It's not John Williams. This is Horner. Horner's underscored, and that is always what's beautiful about
Yeah, Robert, thoughts?
So I agree with a lot of it, like especially like the first Alien movie. I honestly I can't recall music being a part of that really at all. And also Aliens, like I know there is music that's playing because that music is kind of what helps drive the viewer's opinion of what they should be feeling in that exact moment. For me, I've really never recognized the music in Aliens until the end. That
Mm-hmm.
last final moment where Ripley is telling Newt it's okay to dream, and then they're in the pods. We see them like sleeping in the pods, the camera pulls out, and then that music hits that theme. And all that music, even though it's a very simple piece of music, just violins playing, it's like it tells the audience it's okay to relax now. Everything actually is over. There is no more threat. Kind of like the idea behind that is when they left LV-426 and the reactor blew up. You're thinking that's it, we won, and then there's that whole other fight scene with the Queen when they're back at the base. Now this music is conveying, hey, I know we kind of faked you out with the fake ending there. This one actually is the end. You can rest, you can sleep, you can dream. So I love that piece of music. Just that one, the first few notes that plays, that's the good stuff.
I agree. I agree very much. So now we come to our final category. There's a lot we could talk about here, but we're going to keep it pretty basic. The spectacle. This movie is such a spectacle film. Incredible visual effects, Oscar winning effects from Stan Winston. The Alien Queen is an elaborate puppet that is brilliant. And all the explosions and the visual shots, the puppeteering, and the sets, the art direction. This is a very well-made film on a technical level, and it's 40 years old. But visually, for the most part, still holds up. For the most part. Robert, your thoughts on the spectacle?
I love it because, again, yeah, kind of going back and talking about the first Alien movie was so contained and isolated. It's meant to give you that claustrophobic feeling when you're watching it, especially because there's so many passageways and everything on the Nostromo. You have no idea where Ripley's at any given moment. You don't know where the alien is at any given moment. You don't know where Jonesy the cat is at any
Yeah.
given moment. And he's usually like in a cat carrier or whatever, a futuristic cat carrier a lot of the time also. Um, and then this one, just the world's opened up. We've got like everything in regards to the company at the beginning. We get to see again, primarily on like maybe the director's cut of Aliens. We get to see a lot more of the colonists, and then we get to see what happened to that colony, the Hadley's Hope colony, after like all the aliens have come through and ravaged the area. Um, and then getting to see primarily, like for me, probably the two biggest set pieces is the first one where we get the Marines first coming in. They notice all the alien aesthetics on the wall. They see the woman that has the chest burster, the one lone chest burster in the movie.
Yeah.
All of that is just an amazing looking set. And then also the set at the end when we see the queen, we get to see like the ovipositor creating the eggs that she's laying.
Yeah.
We get to see like this whole room that is just full of face hugger eggs, and they're all opening, they're all threatening. Like, I love it. Seeing the alien queen like hanging from like the ceiling, it's just amazing the effect works that they have done for these couple of shots, these couple of scenes in the movie, and just really kind of expanding the lore of the aliens, but the aesthetic of how these movies could look. And I think what makes it even better is because there's such a huge tonal shift coming off of the claustrophobic nature of the first movie to this one involving a lot more other people and not just one small crew of a spaceship. So, yeah, I love it.
Captain?
We first have to acknowledge that this is James Cameron's bread and butter. He makes pretty looking films. No one's going to question that. You want an example? Look at Avatar. It's beautiful. I'll never argue that. It's a gorgeous, beautiful film to look at. It's an art piece. And that's something that James Cameron does well. He's hands on. Titanic. Say what you will about whether you like the story or not. It's a beautiful film to look at with the information he had. Beautiful.
Mhm.
This movie is beautiful. But the problem I have is I guess something I didn't start to realize until later that there is a lot of imagery that's derivative, or at least coincidentally around the same time. For example, you mentioned the Queen hanging there, kind of in the bay. There's another short film that I reminded of that I've seen a couple of times, especially living in California. It's called Captain EO,
Yeah.
Oh,
and that came out same year. They would have had to have been working on it right about at the same time. And listen, if I have to choose between believing who had the idea first, between James Cameron and of the combination of Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, I would go the other way. I really just have a feeling that a lot of his ideas were a little derivative. He makes them look good. Again, Don't deny that. But I feel like I've seen this elsewhere of its time. And I'm not even talking later, of its time. I just feel like I've seen these elsewhere. He does good with what he's got. I'll give him that. But it's not to me, if I had to put it on a list, this is not one of his more overall gorgeous films. It's pretty, it's nice, but when you start to look deeper at it, he did a lot better job with things like The Abyss, with Titanic,
Yeah.
Terminator. The first Terminator, actually, for its simplicity, is a beautiful film, gorgeous film. This needs some help looking at it a little later on, and I think that he probably took a lot of his ideas from things that were going on and is not his most original
Okay. Interesting. Um, I do think though that one thing we can say is that this film is full of iconic image. Ripley facing the Queen, very iconic, and many, many others. And Robert has a figurine of this.
one of those in 1989. I remember having it in my collection. Yep.
Nice. In fact, I was at a convention where a woman had built one of those suits. It was really cool.
The power, you're talking about the power loader.
Yeah, the power loader. But there are so many iconic visuals here and iconic lines that, but as far as a spectacle action film, this is one of the best. And I think James Cameron is a go big or go home kind of filmmaker. So it's exciting. And just from a visual perspective, it's a lot of fun. All right, we come sort of to the end. So, Robert, I cannot thank you enough for joining us today. What are your final thoughts on this movie?
Yeah, Aliens is constantly as much kind of like what I was saying at the beginning. I'm constantly torn between whether Aliens or Alien is my favorite of the series. Most of the time, I'm probably going to lean more towards Aliens. But if I want to put this in another category for comparison, is it's also one of my top favorite action movies, and I usually will have this tied with Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Coincidentally, both of them done by James Cameron. So yes,
Yes.
as y'all were saying, James Cameron knows how to put together a movie. That being said, I'm not necessarily a huge fan of the Avatar movies. They're good. I've enjoyed especially the second one. It took me a while to come around to the first one. Those are gorgeous, as we were saying, as far as spectacle goes, but yeah, almost everything that James Cameron has done, I'm usually a pretty big fan of. True Lies was great. The Abyss I've seen once and I felt like it was a little too slow for me. I actually really do like Titanic. I usually will watch that movie once a year because
Yeah.
it's just a good it's a good job of taking something that happened in real life and turning it into a full-fledged movie that is still entertaining, and especially with its runtime being so long. Um, Coming back to Aliens, again, this is just such a good movie. The combination of what I was saying at the beginning, the fact that we got away from that slow burn of the first movie by introducing these characters and giving most of these characters very well-rounded personalities. Like we don't really know anything about like really about Frost or Wierzbowski, but we got some like good information, some good character development for Vasquez and for Drake and like some of these other side characters that are you wouldn't typically get that much information. You wouldn't necessarily care about them. But like when Vasquez and Gorman are sacrificing themselves, you feel bad for them. Gorman is like supposed to be the leader that they're all supposed to be listening to, yet all they do is mock him until that end moment. Like I love what they've done with specifically developing the characters, making the aliens a bigger threat thanks to Stan Winston's ways of creating these bigger, larger than life characters. And then, yeah, just making a massively huge story that took a completely different tonal shift. I love the fact that they succeeded at that, and I love Aliens.
Chris, final thoughts.
This is good on so many levels. This easily reaches my top 5 sci-fi sequels.
Mhm.
Without question. It's up there for me with Empire Strikes Back, Wrath of Khan, Terminator 2 Judgment Day. That's saying something.
Yeah.
Even Bride of Frankenstein is an amazing sci-fi sequel. So what I really love about this though is you don't exactly need the first one, which is good. Always good of a sequel when you don't have to have the first one to make sense. They kind of recap the basics for you. I'm good with that. All right. Um, but they play to their themes. They do it so well that this goes beyond science fiction. And when a sci-fi film can excel beyond its genre trappings, you've got a great film. And those other films that I've listed, they were able to do the same thing. And that's why I highly recommend this film. And it's in there. It should be watched not just as a sci-fi film, not just as a sequel, but as a great film. Does it have some aging issues? Yeah, a little bit, you know, Cameron for me and some of the spectacles. That's my opinion. But otherwise, would I still go back and watch it again? Yeah. Yes, I would. Do I still go back and watch it again? Yeah. Yes, I do.
Yes. And for those of you listening, if you haven't seen it, what are you doing listening to this
Go
show?
watch it.
This is an easy recommend.
Yep.
Now, I have a lot that I could say, but because I'm recovering from the Andorian shingles, I'll keep it brief. This is a great film. One of the great action films. It's not to be missed. And those are my final thoughts. Robert, thanks for joining us. Where can everyone find you?
So you can find me a part of the Cinefanatics with my brother over on youtube.com/Cinefanatics. You can follow us on social media at the Cinefanatics on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Me personally, you can follow at RCA Reacts on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Letterbox. Also at youtube.com/RCA Reacts, where I will just react to whatever else I feel like reacting to that's not a movie.
All right. And with that, I turn the con back to Captain Ingle.
Thank you so much. All right, we got a lot coming up here to close out the year as we're going into November. So movie night next month is going to be another sci-fi classic that we've been wanting to look at. I myself personally have reviewed this with another friend of mine before, but I have not done Brennan. We're going to be taking a look at another 80s, well, yeah, another classic. It's Blade Runner.
Yeah.
We are taking a look at Blade Runner next month. But next week we are back to normal trek. We already hit it last week. But next week we will be looking at Star Trek Discovery's pilot episode, The Vulcan Hello.
Oh boy.
Oh boy, that'll be a lot of fun. Do you remember the movie we're closing the year out with, Brennan?
Batteries not included.
That's right. Yeah, thank you. See, I recommended it to him and I forgot it. Yes, and we're going to be taking a look at the Steven Spielberg produced A Batteries Not Included as our Christmas episode in December. Lot to look forward to. But Brennan, where can the people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Brennan Mystical, Threads and Instagram at Brennan Blue. And you can find me on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify under Page Turners They Were Not.
You can find me on Twitch and Twitter at CIngle1984. But as always, we end every episode. Applause and live long and prosper.
Peace and long life.